Hello YouTube and fellow Star Wars collectors! On this episode of Toys Are the Way, I'll be sharing my process and modifications behind this recent custom Cobb Vanth action figure. If you're new to the channel or a fan of Star Wars collecting, be sure to smash a like on this video, remember to subscribe, ring that bell for notifications, or even become a channel member. Welcome back, gang. So it took a little while, but I have finally wrapped up this project, which is an upgrade to the recent Vintage Collection Deluxe figure, Cobb Vanth Mandalorian Armor, who you can see here on the right hand side. And initially I was not too happy about this figure just because the decision to make that soft plastic armor that's kind of slip on, and I thought his helmet also looked a little bit off, and just we've been asking for this figure for quite some time and it needed to be perfect. And as I mentioned in my review, it is definitely still a very nice figure, but it's lacking in some areas. Therefore, I wanted to upgrade it with something I thought was much more appropriate for my collection and my action figure photography, which is this custom upgrade here, which if you look at the two put together, there are definitely some differences here, and I think my custom stands out a bit more and just, fills that void I was looking for in my collection. Which I will just say was not exactly a very easy process, and you're mostly going to need this great figure here, VC-186 Boba Fett from Return of the Jedi. Fantastic figure, and it's not a simple 1 to 2 mixture here, so there's definitely a little bit of modifications that need to be made. But with all that being said, let's take a closer look at how I made this figure. So let me begin by saying this is the most annoying part of the whole project. You have to separate this VC-186 Boba Fett / Mandalorian upper body tooling, and it's a bit tricky because it's a hard plastic upper torso that is two parts that are glued together. So in order to separate those, you need to put it into hot water and then immediately freeze it after it's been boiled up, and then use a sharp object to separate the two pieces apart, which is not very easy and a bit frustrating. And if you don't do this, it's kind of hard to get that middle peg piece right there out, and I pretty much just ripped it apart prior, and here you can see the internals and then the leftover pieces, which I'll use for a different custom in the future, which will probably be a flight suit Boba Fett from the Book of Boba Fett. But moving on, we need to get our Cobb Vanth going. So I've already boiled and popped his arms, which you can see are kind of placed on that VC-186 upper body, but now we need the upper torso in general. And this is much easier to take apart thanks to new tooling that we're seeing these days, so it's a simple boil and pop. But we will have to kind of figure out how much of that torso we need in order to, make this whole thing work. Because as you can see, we need the upper body and just a little bit of his lower abdomen. Therefore, I'm going to measure accordingly and use an X-Acto to kind of score a little mark here so that you can see where I exactly need to cut it. And then I will use some plastic cutting shears to make a nice, perfect cut. These are very handy tools, which you can pick up on Amazon, and I'll have them linked in the description down below. But as you can see, we have a nice portion of his lower abdomen, which we'll be using for this custom. But in order to make it actually fit, we're going to have to shave some of that top edge part to kind of round it off and allow it to kind of form together with this upper body piece. Here you can see I've already done that and put everything together. So this is kind of the basic buildup of this figure. I still have the neck from the VC-186 Boba Fett just as a tester, but you can see I have the jetpack added, and pretty much everything is held together with sticky tack because, it does the job, and I didn't want to, glue this right away if it didn't work, and I also had to make sure that the arms would kind of work in there. But lastly, I did want to take the neck from Cobb Vanth and actually apply it to this figure because it would make it look a bit more accurate, and I just wanted to try it out. So I pretty much took that upper body piece that we were going to throw away and sliced it in half and tried to get this additional piece of his neck out of there, which is always glued together for most of these figures. But it was pretty easy to get it out once you kind of slice this in half and just gave it a little bit of a pull. So now we have to make that work for the VC-186 upper body Boba Fett, which is going to be a little bit tricky but not too difficult, mostly because all these VC-186 parts are sculpted and engineered to fit together like a nice puzzle piece, and we're just going to have to use a little bit of glue in order for this upper neck piece to kind of work with this tooling here. But here you can see the basic assembly and makeup of this figure. I'm going to put the arms back in there, and the tack is actually used as a bonding agent, but also to give a little bit more heft into that tooling and make those arms a little bit, tighter and not swing around all loose. But but that's pretty much the basic gist of this upper body figure here. And then you just take the tack, which pretty much holds it together with the lower abdomen, and we have a Cobb Vanth upgrade here, which I think is pretty simple and a bit of a Frankenstein, but it definitely looks so much better in my opinion, and yeah, very happy with this. And as I mentioned before, we're going to have to use some Loctite glue to make that upper neck piece stay on this figure and actually allow us to, pop the head on and off. So once I kind of assembled everything, I did put a little glue at the top here, which is probably going to bond the two pieces together, but I don't plan to take, that chest armor apart. And then we're going to put this upper shoulder armor piece on, which is going to be stuck on as well, and then the neck itself, which after a couple of minutes of dry time, it's going to be nice and secure, so I will be able to pop his head on and off and have no problems with this falling apart. So definitely a pretty nice little upgrade there, and I'm glad that actually worked out well. But moving right along, we're going to have to work on the next part of this project, which is weathering up this armor to actually look like it's been in the Sarlacc pit. Now, here you can see the plastic armor that comes with this deluxe figure, which is just a plastic slip-on. Not my favorite whatsoever, so I'm going to be using some Vallejo paints to add some silver paint applications, and then these browns here to, dirty up Cobb Vanth a little bit more because, you get a little dusty on the streets of Mos Pelgo and all that sand flying around. So for the silver paint applications, you're just going to need a very little bit of paint, which I'm actually mostly just going to use this piece of foam to kind of, dab it on a little bit and just give it those light scuff marks. So nothing too drastic. You want to be subtle here, but also kind of, put a couple paint applications on there to make it look weathered up like that acid was just tearing away at this armor. This is a really easy way to put this paint applications on there versus using a brush, which would have to be very fine tipped and just not have that same kind of like scratch mark effect. So I use this on the front, the back, and pretty much all of the armor throughout this figure. And after a couple, applications of it, it's starting to cake on there, and I think this looks very, very nice. It didn't show up too well on the yellow shoulder armor, just because, yellow with a light color doesn't have much contrast, but once I started putting it on the gauntlets, that really started to bring things to life, which I was kind of confused why Hasbro didn't put paint applications on the whole 360 of that gauntlet, but here we are. And then you want to take a little bit of the paint application with the brush and just kind of put it onto the knee armor, which here the brush worked a little bit better just because it was a smaller area that required a bit more hand control. And then I used the brush as well on the gauntlets to give it a couple more hits and just swipes and just, kind of accent a couple more scratches and stuff like that, just to bring everything to life and just make it look very, very weathered, which was representative in the show. Next thing we need to do is the helmet, which would be pretty similar as well. We're just going to take the silver paint applications and the little piece of foam again and just do some nice swipes. Very subtle, but at the same time, caking it on here and there and just trying to match what was seen in the show and the helmet that came with this deluxe figure. And I gotta say that this started to look really good once you put some of that silver paint on there. I think that turned out very, very nicely, and I just like the shape of this helmet so much more than what was given to us with this figure. But moving right along, we had to address the jetpack, which also needed some weathering itself because it was way too clean. So I did the same thing here, used the brush and the foam piece to, put a lot of scuff marks on there, give it some metallic scratches, and just give it, a little bit more life. And I think once some of this paint started to hit, I was really starting to be excited about this project. The jetpack was definitely way too clean, and yeah, once you dirtied this up, that started to look very proper. Same thing with the rifle. This was definitely a big miss in my opinion. It was just, no life to this thing. It also doesn't have the handles painted properly with, that wrapping that's on there. So that would be the next part of this project after I give it a nice metallic scuffing. The pistol as well, that needed some life to be added to it as well. But for the wrappings on the handle and the stock, we needed to, mix a little bit of paint. So I kind of just eyeballed this. It's a tan color, and I just wanted it to be a little bit darker than, straight out of the bottle. And then this would take a couple of paint applications, coats, just to, help build it up. And once you started to put this on there, the rifle was really starting to look rather nice in my opinion. And after one last dry brushing to kind of pull everything together, I think this rifle is pretty much complete. And you can see the drastic difference we have here. A lot more detail and a lot more accuracy. So another thing I wanted to do was, dirty up Cobb Vanth's pants because they look very, very clean. Same thing with his boots. They're actually a bit dirty in the show. They're kind of sandy and dusty. So I wanted to add a little bit of that life to his figure as well. So same thing here, just kind of mix of paint and then very light dry brushing on there. And I think this actually really brought the figure to a whole nother level. So I added that to the pants, which also really accented a lot of that sculpting detail and just, brought everything together and gave him that nice dirty look that we see in the show. So a very nice upgrade at minimum right there. And then here you can see all the paint applications pretty much done for the most part, and the weathering looks fantastic. It looks a lot more accurate to what was seen in the show, and just a bit more accurate and deluxe than the figure that we got. And moving right along, we had to address his pistol, which was lacking in the paint application department, so I pretty much got some brown paint and added it to the handle on both sides, and I think this was also a nice upgrade, which this would have been something Hasbro should have really included. I don't know why they opted to just make the weapons so bland, but here we are. Another paint application that I wanted to add was a bit of a dirty wash. So I took some Vallejo washes that I have and just, applied these to certain parts of the armor that needed a bit more toning down. Specifically the tubes for, the flamethrower gauntlet, which were way too bright in my opinion. So I used this wash to kind of dirty them up and dull down that plastic. I also applied it to the sides of the flight suit because this needed to be dirtied up as well as, it was in the Sarlacc and then walking around the sands of Tatooine. I also wanted to, dirty down that holster, which was a little too bright and needed to have that leather look that was kind of, a little bit more worn and torn. And then I kind of just, used a dry brushing of whatever was left on that brush and just applied it everywhere. The next thing we needed to do was address these tubes. And originally I wanted to, slice off the peg and then apply some glue to this and just glue it to the armor because I thought this would be maybe the easiest and smartest solution to this figure. I tried this out and it was kind of effective, but also kind of not what I wanted. So I kind of opted to scratch that whole idea, and I had a brilliant moment where I was like, oh, it looks like it fits in this small area of the armor and arm socket. So that's kind of what it's supposed to look like. So I pretty much just wedged it in there, and that solved the trick for me. It's in there, you can move his arm and it doesn't fall out. So that kind of worked out perfectly, and I think it looks a lot better than what was done on this deluxe figure and what I kind of initially wanted to do. And now that the paint applications are complete, the last thing to do is to hit this with a matte clear coat to seal everything together and protect all of this awesome work that we've done on this custom figure. Allow the figure to dry for a couple hours, and then you are safe to reassemble Cobb Vanth, the Marshal of Mos Pelgo. I've got to say that this was a very successful custom, and I am glad that everything worked out pretty easily in my opinion. Yes, there was definitely some modifications that needed to be made, but I am very happy with the results. And I hope that this video has inspired you in some way, shape, or form to, upgrade or adjust your figures accordingly in your collection if you choose to do so. But with all that being said, let's get this figure set up in some action figure photography. I hope you've enjoyed this video and taking a look at my behind the scenes process for my Cobb Vanth Mandalorian Armor custom action figure. Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and don't forget to smash a like on this video and subscribe if you're new to the channel. It really helps and is always greatly appreciated. Thanks everyone, and may the Force be with you.